Good evening, comrades, and welcome to the third episode of Confessions of a Marxist. My name is Alex.
I'm Desmond.
And I'm Josh.
And we're communists.
We are indeed, and today we do have a special episode for you guys. There's going to be pretty much two major topics we're going to be talking about. The first is the movie Panther from 1995, which is about the Black Panther organization from the 1960s. And we're just going to kind of go over some of those scenes from the movie as they kind of relate to what the Black Lives Matter movement and what a lot of us are facing here in the United States. And then the second part of our episode is our overall theme is going to be communism and its relation to democracy. We're going to be talking about issues like police reform and electoral politics in general. So that's going to be a really interesting discussion, and so make sure you guys stick around for the second part of the episode. To start it up, we're going to go ahead and discuss one of the first pivotal scenes of the movie, which is a candlelight vigil that happens in this kind of like, if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of like a rural road. There aren't many street lights in the area where it takes place, and
there's no street light at all, which is actually the whole point of conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no street light at all whatsoever, and the beginning of this issue starts with I believe it's like a 13-year-old boy who was ran over by a car, and so the Black community saw this as an opportunity. It being the third child that they had lost this month to traffic-related incidents, they took this as an opportunity to try to petition the city to get a traffic light installed. So the vigil was held for the 13-year-old boy the night of his death, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was a hefty crowd of Black people that took the streets and were peacefully protesting and chanting and singing songs. And in rolls the Black Panthers. Very kind of really small group at the time. They had 4 members at this scene in the movie, and they were just there to take down some badge numbers, to observe the police, and make sure that, you know, they don't get too violent, they don't get too brutal. So that was their mission at first, because they didn't really see any other way to go about it. And so they continued to protest. They continued to march down in the vigil. The police asked them to disperse, and not within 30 seconds later, of course, they all just start kind of storming in on them and beating them with batons and, you know, trying to haul as many off to jail as possible. So that's actually brings up our next scene, which takes place in the prison cell. And I'll pass it off to Josh because I know he really enjoyed this scene. So I'll let him kind of steer the direction of this scene and the stuff that we want to kind of point out to you guys.
Well, thank you, Alex. And it was a really interesting scene indeed. If you remember, Alex, there was the Black preacher man, and you know he's got his whole, I'll tell you what we gotta do, we gotta turn the other cheek, you know. We can't you know, we can't let this make us become violent or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and here, you know, Huey P. Newton and the Black Panthers, they correctly point out, they're like, well, listen, man, you know, the white man's had 500 years to think about what they're doing to us. I think they know full well what they're doing. It's not that, you know, they know not what they do type of business, right? And This is where they really formulate their ideology, and they use the fancier terms to explain it, but then it gets nicely simplified for some of the lay people in prison there to understand. It is basically, he says it brilliantly, you know, where he's like, we gotta have guns. That's what the man's saying. You know, we gotta arm ourselves, right? And that is the decisive turning point for, I would argue, for that whole civil rights movement, that is a decisive turning point, right? Because up to that point, the whole mantra of peaceful resistance is entirely dead in the ears of these people. So yeah, I mean, what do you think about that, Desmond?
Well, I mean, that sounds accurate to me.
All right, well, moving on to the next scene of the movie, which is kind of like one of my favorites too, was the scene where they're so it shows them in the cars, and they are reciting to themselves like, hey, we need to get guns, we need to arm ourselves, it's within our rights as American citizens to to carry arms. So let's use these laws, let's use these tools of our environment and drive our own force. You know what I mean? We're going to police the police. So this next scene is really, really, really cool. They're in the car, they're all decked out in leather, and they're wearing their black berets, and they're talking about what their mission is, right? And so, they make it very clear that their goal is not to just start shooting up police officers. That's not the goal. Like, that's not going to solve anything. But the goal is to police the police. If they see a bunch of armed brothers out there, armed to the teeth, ready to go with guns to defend their rights as American citizens, then they're less likely to act, wild and misbehave and start abusing people. So they actually stroll up in this scene. They actually stroll up on two police officers. I mean, giving this dude everything they got. I mean, they're beating the ever-loving crap out of this guy. And you feel bad for him, but the Panthers pull up, and they come out of the car with their guns ready to go in plain sight. And these police officers just kind of shit their pants, run back to the car, get on the radio. Oh, yeah, we need backup, blah, 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 blah. And the police officer is then confronting Huey Newton, and he's asking him, where'd you get these guns, blah, 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 blah. And Huey recites the laws of California. He says, within the state of California, it's legal for me to carry a firearm in plain sight. And the cop was just kind of, baffled by the fact that he could, that this, at the time in the 1960s, they were shocked that these black people were so educated. They were so, willing to exercise their right as American citizens. I feel like that's a very, very important part of that movement, is that they were educated, is that they were very, very informed. They spent most of their time educating other people on real history, not the, petty bourgeois propaganda. And that was the ultimate goal of the Black Panthers, was to police their own communities, was to give their own people a fighting chance in a world that's ran by racism, and I really rang home with that scene. There's a group of people there too at the time, and the police are trying to disperse them. And as they're trying to disperse them, Huey does say, my brothers and sisters, it's within your right to observe what the police are doing. Under the state of California, you can be within a 5 to 10 foot radius of a police officer. And they were standing about 20 feet away. And he makes that point. So they all just start kind of huddling closer, right? And the situation just gets more and more intense until the police finally just pack up their guns and just go home. No blood was spilt. You know what I mean? The lives of the Black community were still intact. You know what I mean? And everybody, it was crazy, because there's this Black woman in the background. She's like, "Oh Lord Jesus, I done died and gone to heaven." And it's it's really kind of like this super empowering scene for it's like that one step forward for the Black Panther Party. You know what I mean? And in bringing up, sorry, Josh, were you gonna say something?
Oh no, that was me. I said I was actually gonna, just talk about how the Black Panthers really knew how to use the law in their own favor.
Mm-hmm.
Huey Newton was a very educated person. I believe he got a PhD in social science.
Yes.
So he's actually, the Dr. Huey P. Newton. But we have to remember, the Black Panthers knew how to use the law in their favor. But when they started doing that, what happened? We see Ronald Reagan, this champion of, the right wing and gun rights, starts revoking gun rights, while he was governor of California at this time, and so that's the issue. They knew how to use the law in their favor, so they used it strategically. But once they started doing that, we see that the law started to change. So the main point to remember is, yeah, they used the law in their favor, but they were also armed. You know what I mean? Which is also very important.
Yeah.
And this is where you see the pernicious influence of ideology at work. This is the difference between liberalism and socialism, because the liberal says, yeah, you have bourgeois rights, you have the right to own guns, you have the right to own property. But where the liberal and the socialist differs is the socialist says, yes, you have this right and we will allow you to exercise it, but the liberal says you can only exercise it, so far as your property goes, right? As for the limits of your property is the limits of your freedom. You have all the freedom in the world. You can do whatever you want, but when the money bags come into the equation, that's the boundary. So that's where we socialists say, no, if you want true equality and you want gun rights for everybody, we say arm the people. I mean, I don't understand where this pernicious mythology arose that the communists want to take away your guns. I mean, hell, one of the most armed states in the world, not just military, but even farmers and factory workers were armed, is, guess what? North Korea. I mean, for God's sakes, really. I mean,
and Albania before that.
Yeah, exactly. Socialist states.
Absolutely.
Or where the people are always the most
all socialist states. Yeah, and there's a lot of we all know there's a lot of propaganda surrounding the situation in North Korea for just over the last 60, 70 years, and so that's always been a struggle when mentioning North Korea. But moving on into our topic today and that's why I like to bring this scene up, because it ties directly into communism versus democracy. And the reality is they made the laws so that these people were able to carry guns, but then they quickly changed those laws as rapidly as possible. That's
the problem with liberalism. It's like you can technically do this, but then if you start using it in your own favor and for your own class interest, then all of a sudden the laws can change.
Absolutely. So that's one endangerment of playing by the rules. But as we know, you know what I mean? You're not gonna succeed in a revolution if you're not gonna succeed in building a party and in building a cadre, if you will, if you don't follow the rules and regulations of the current country. You know what I mean? So it goes without saying that there's always gonna be a constant battle right there. You know what I mean? But inevitably the idea is to keep yourself as under the radar as possible until it's time for revolution, so that you can build a community of people in support of that, in support of that idea. So kind of moving on, actually, because the Black Panther Party kind of after this point takes off and their numbers kind of increase, and they did come in contact with, I believe, the Southern California or the San Francisco Black Panthers or something like that. And
San Francisco.
Yeah. And so they try to reach out to them, and they can tell right off the bat that this whole relationship isn't conducive. And it's a really powerful scene. I'd like, actually, Desmond, if you'd like to explain that scene, that'd be great.
All right. So basically, another group formed independently using the Black Panthers name. So this group was in contact with Malcolm X's widow, and they contacted the real Oakland Black Panthers, and said, we're going to have an event in Oakland, and your group and my group are going to get together and provide security for her, because her husband was just assassinated.
Correct.
So they do that, and they realize that this other group that started on its own in San Francisco using their name were carrying unloaded guns. That means they were there for show, but they had no capacity for violence. They were talking a big talk, but they would not have been ready to defend the widow of Malcolm X. And another problem with them, the Black Panthers of Oakland were a Marxist group, but this other group was actually a Islamic fundamentalist group, oddly enough, using the same name and trying to copy the style of the Oakland Black Panthers. So what the Black Panthers in Oakland do, they see this contradiction and they decide to immediately resolve it by getting in their truck and driving over to the San Francisco Black Panthers and rolling up on their party with their guns loaded and said, you're either going to merge with us and follow our rules, or you're going to give up our name.
Yep.
That's how it's going to be.
And there was a third option. He said Huey said, "We'll annihilate you all right here."
Oh yeah,
So,
and then there's that. So it's like if they had all their guns, they already knew the other group didn't have loaded guns. They were formed around a little charismatic religious leader, and he couldn't do anything.
That was Huey's main reason for confronting them. Actually, was after they escorted Malcolm's widow. They realized that their men weren't carrying armed loaded guns for the escort, and so Huey saw this as counter-revolutionary. And I completely agree with him, 100%. You can't go to do revolutionary acts and bite yourself in the ass, so to speak, by not loading your gun.
Well, me being me being the poet that I am, I can see the metaphor here. I mean, the metaphorical value of it is not lost. I mean, they're going around carrying unloaded guns, and I mean, what do we see today in the leftist movements in the United States now? There's a lot of movements that carry around unloaded guns, so to speak, and what I really mean by that is no guns at all.
No guns at all, yep.
Well, yeah, not only that, they're also carrying around these slogans, no justice, no peace, and then they proceed to have peaceful protests, which to me, that is counter-revolutionary, because you're not actually trying to change anything at that point, because you're making empty threats, and then with no capability to carry it out.
Yeah, breaking down that slogan, what it's used to represent is, as long as there's no justice for people like Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, all these major names in the Black Lives Matter movement that people are trying to win, some justice for. There's a lot of injustice out there. So what that slogan means, no justice, no peace. If you do not provide us with the termination of these not only just the termination of these police officers, but the imprisonment of these police officers for the full extent of whatever felony they are charged for, there will be no peace in the streets. We will riot, we will burn shit down, and we will make it a point to make your profits, to make your pocket hurt until these are
murder, exactly, Alex. And the murder of George Floyd, I think, was by far, I think the murder of George Floyd was really a crescendo. It was really a high watermark of the disgusting injustice, right? I mean, I remember following the events closely after they happened, and you really saw the inability of the right, even the most ardent right-wing apologists, from the unashamed, the leader of Turning Point USA guy, they were so unashamedly they tried to, he's a petty criminal and so on, and even if they should not have looted and destroyed property and so on. I mean, just the most, just the most pitiful,
unapologetic. Yeah.
Right, exactly. They really had no excuse anymore. There was really a very poor attempt, and I mean, even look at the president himself. I mean, comparing these protesters, who a lot of these protesters I wouldn't even call leftists hardly, and he's calling them Antifa and anarchists and so on.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sorry,
basically the right wing and the ruling class in general was more offended by the destruction and damaging of property than the ending of human lives. That's what really ruffled their feathers, and that's what they're commenting on.
You're taking a word from Marx there, Desmond. I noticed that.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Well, do we want to digress into the next part of the discussion?
Yeah. Let's do that.
Before we do, though, I would recommend all of our viewers to go watch Panther. It is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it's very emotional, very riveting. It's got a very powerful story behind it. And if you're interested in more Black Panther history and stuff like that, we'll see about dropping some links in the description for you guys.
You can go and tell your friends, I hate to say it, but me and my antisocialness. It's like you could go and tell people, I love the Panther movie. It's great, and they're gonna be like, oh the Marvel Panther movie. No, not the Marvel movie. No, no, the real deal, right?
The real deal Panthers.
real
Yeah,
deal.
yeah, absolutely. Real revolution in the real world. Am I right?
Absolutely. Which it
All
was
right,
so.
guys.
It was. By the way, like I never watched the Marvel movie adaptation with
Nor did I.
Wakanda and all that, but you can just even tell just from the name, like Wakanda. It's such a bad. It's
Yeah,
such a bad appropriation.
It is a very bad appropriation. Just from all the memes I've seen about the movie, I can't even. I never attempted to even watch it, honestly.
No, it's probably even worse than like Death of Stalin or some other kind of thing.
That was a horrible fucking film.
Yeah, I think
Oh my
movies about real heroes.
Mhm.
Watch.
That's right.
Absolutely. So anyway, we digress. Moving on to the next part of the discussion. Josh and Des, I know you guys wanted to kind of, and we've kind of already kind of been touching on it, but I know we wanted to kind of expand a little bit more on communism and its relation to democracy.
Absolutely. So me and Desmond were very intrigued by a particular document that we both discovered here. I'm going to take my favorite excerpt here, and then I'm going to have Desmond expound on this document. So Karl Marx, this is an interesting quote I found on of all places, Instagram. I know, right? Politigram. It's terrible. It's terrible. And I wasn't even sure if it was right. It's like I wasn't even sure if this was a real quote, but it really is. So Marx says, the theme remains always the same. The verdict is ever ready and invariably reads, socialism. Even bourgeois liberalism is declared socialistic. Bourgeois financial reform, socialistic. It was socialistic to build a railway where a canal already existed. And it was socialistic to defend oneself with a cane when one was attacked with a rapier. I mean, this is absolutely like, to me, this quote is so beautiful because it completely speaks to the pathetic reformist attitude of today's progressive movement who, in the face of the murder of a human being, celebrate and applaud with the removal of inanimate statue objects,
Yep.
as if there was compensation, as if there was justice done.
Absolutely.
I mean, what do you? But anyway, so Desmond, can you tell me
Well,
some more about this 18th of Brumaire, this document?
Okay, well, the book you quoted from was by Karl Marx. It's the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, and it's about the events leading to the coup d'état of Napoleon the Little on December 2nd, 1851. But basically, it's about applied historical materialism. Basically, contains the famous Marx quote that men make their own history, but they don't make it just however they want. They inherit certain historical concrete conditions that they inherit from the past that they have to work with. We have to analyze the world around us to plan how we're going to act in the world. We can't just do whatever we want. We have to do what's compatible with our actual conditions around us. And getting to that, it makes me think of nowadays in the United States we have certain conditions prevailing where we have a so-called left-wing faction of the government, and we have an openly reactionary far right-wing faction of the government. And we got one wing of the government led by Trump and friends and a bunch of bankers trying to roll back LGBT reforms and invalidate Obamacare, and then we have
it's absolutely tragic. The Trump administration is I cannot stress this enough, but it is the most tragic fucking thing.
Well, yeah, it's openly reactionary. He's openly trying to roll back basic social progress.
I mean, whatever happened? I mean, does anybody even remember? I mean, it's almost embarrassing, right? It's only been 4 years. Does anybody even remember when this guy had the gall to say that he was going to drain the swamp?
Yes. Yes.
More like he became the swamp
Green, the
monster.
swamp. Yeah. Oh god. Oh god.
Became the swamp thing.
He looks like a swamp monster.
He's said so many things just in the last 4 years that, like, I mean, I did rewatch a little tidbit. I did rewatch his old reality television show. What's it called? Yeah. Anyway, regardless, and he's always been this way for like forever. He has always been a complete idiot, and even in his own personal business aspect, like his own personal businesses have fucking failed, have completely tanked. This man is everything but, just, and he should not, absolutely should not have as much fucking power as he does. But here we are. We live in a world, right?
Well, I'll actually tell you, Alex. I mean, Trump makes me a pessimist, and here's why. The reason why Trump makes me a pessimist is because this is another difference between liberals and Marxists. Is the problem is that liberals often have the habit of getting into conspiracy theories, like they're like, oh, Trump was in collusion with the Russians, and he's in collusion, and there's this whole apparatus, and they're doing all this, right? Or then, like, on the other end of the spectrum, you have people like, oh, it's actually the deep state, and they're undermining. Like, I'm actually a pessimist here, because what I say is these men have absolutely no idea what they're doing whatsoever. I mean, the situation is just so much worse, right? I mean, it'd be so much better if it was like, oh yeah, Trump has a plan. He's planning on doing all this, right? Plummeting the economy and driving the country into chaos, right? He's got this organized plan. No, he's just has no idea, and he's just trying to defend his own egoism at the expense of the actual functionality of the state itself.
Absolutely. And we're all feeling it.
Well, guys, let's look at the alternative. The faction of our government that calls itself the left, how they're responding to this reaction. They're basically saying, instead of shooting people in the heart, you could shoot them in the leg, or don't shoot people with rubber bullets anymore.
Yeah, ban rubber bullets. Yeah.
If you'll indulge me, Desmond, if you'll allow me, please. So this is an excellent quote from. I'll have the viewers guess where this, the wonderful angel who would propose this piece of legislation, ban the use of rubber bullets, tear gas, and pepper spray on protesters, and that is, from, not from some like idiotic, right winger, right? I mean, this is from yours truly, Bernie Sanders. Now, if you'll allow me to be a little barbaric here, please give me the opportunity, and I want to say,
yours truly, Bernie Sanders.
Could you imagine it? Like, could you imagine the horror, right? Like, if we lived in the Third Reich, and some like candidate of the NSDAP said to the German people, he said, let us ban the use of Zyklon B and ovens and barbed wire and so on, and hounds on the Jewish people. I mean, could you imagine the horror of such a statement, right? It's hard to conceive.
It's hard to imagine. Yeah, it's really hard to imagine it.
I mean, does Bernie just think that, okay, so they'll stop using rubber bullets, and then what? Do they just bring in tanks then? I mean, he didn't say anything about it. I mean, right, I mean, what are they going to do?
The batons and the tasers.
Yeah, he doesn't even say that they should stop harassing the protesters. They'll just use different tools,
So looking back at everything we discussed, peaceful protesting and reformism obviously not working, how do we assess the situation? And how should we carry out, Des and Josh, I'm asking you guys directly, how should we carry out the protesting and reforming from here on out? What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're going to take a word from Lenin here. I mean, this is what most communists, this is what even all progressives, they don't understand about reformism and peaceful protesting, is that the problem is that these methods are only a means, but they're not an end to themselves. And I mean, look, we're not saying, don't protest. We're not saying don't agitate for reform, right? This is not some kind of accelerationist stance that we're taking. Like, reforms are good. It's good to win reforms and it's good to protest. The problem today in America is that the left treats these little victories as if they've won the whole marathon. And this is a marathon, you know. You can reach many milestones, but you're running a marathon. And we can't just sit there and say, oh, well, we've knocked down a bunch of statues and gotten a bunch of cops fired and gotten like some police departments closed. It's like, you think that that's like that's endgame? Like, I don't know. What do you think, Des?
So I think that the problem with liberal progressives is they're trying to carry out these reforms while ignoring the different class antagonisms and contradictions in society. As long as there are distinct classes with differing interests, there's going to be conflict, and no amount of reform will ever be able to make peace with all the classes with each other. I mean, that's what the fascists tried to do, that's what the Nazis tried to do, you know, social harmony while maintaining class contradictions, and we saw how that played out. So, you know, the alternative is class struggle continues in society regardless. So what the proletariat and the working class needs to do is organize independently of the ruling class establishment, independently of the Republican and Democrat factions of the American regime, and organize for itself in its own class interest. Wouldn't you agree, Josh?
I agree completely. Like, what people need to do more than anything on the left is, rather than chanting these cheap slogans and congratulating themselves with this false activism, like, and I hate to say it, you know, this is not just to justify my own, you know, armchair lifestyleism, but this is a legitimate piece of advice, is the best organizing can be oftentimes just done simply locally at, like, in, you know, in your own community, in your own area, raising class consciousness, right?
Well, yeah, let's look at what the Black Panthers did. I mean, the government did not meet their demands and install those lights right away, so the Black Panthers acted directly and started monitoring and controlling the traffic themselves. That's called direct action. You know, they were a real vanguard organization in America.
And if you'll allow me, I'd like to introduce another term into the vernacular too. Is this idea of dual power that's really been forgotten by so many on the left today. You know, when Lenin and the Bolsheviks were carrying out their program in Russia, it's not just about, you know, seizing the highest echelons of political power. It's not just about, oh, you know, we got to get this person elected to the governorship or the mayorship. We got to get Bernie Sanders elected to the presidency. No. Building dual power is about building an organization or series of organizations at local to mid levels that becomes so viable that it is able to bypass state power, which is what the Black Panthers did. They built a dual power institution that basically reigned over the parts of California and the parts of many other states in the country without the federal government and the CIA being able to act, because guess what? They didn't rule over those black communities to begin with. So they filled in that vacuum, and that's what the left needs to do.
Yeah,
that's right. Build full power.
I agree. And that is everything on the agenda for today, guys. And yeah, I really appreciate the following and everybody tuning into our episodes. If you guys enjoyed this, make sure you like, make sure you comment, subscribe. Definitely try to raise more discussion. Like we said, best type of organizing, you know, happens in your area. Don't be afraid to, you know, talk to those around you. Try to educate your family. Try to educate your friends. Stay informed and stay safe. And we'll be uploading another episode next week by, I believe, Saturday. So make sure you guys tune into that. And once again, I'm Alex.
I'm Desmond.
And I'm Josh.
And we'll see you next time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's easy to see. Right on your black and white TV. Black man, blue cop, red blood. Brothers watching other brothers die. Oh, my. That's the American way. Hey, what you doing? You're gonna die, black boy. Go to jail.
The police threw them both in jail.
You know, the man is convinced that his foot is
is an integral part of our ass.
Yeah, but fuck that.